No takers? All right. Good evening and welcome to the Nutrition and Hunger Forum presented by the Junior League of Scranton in partnership with Springboard Healthy Scranton. I'm Shannon Roach-Cusick, 2016-2018 president of the Junior League. As an organization, we made it our goal to positively impact Scranton and the surrounding communities in the area of childhood nutrition and hunger. Tonight, we hope to create awareness and provide education on hunger and food insecurities in our community. This is our first major step to learn where the needs are in our community and how we can make a real impact. Thank you to Guy Singer for the wonderful partnership. Thank you to our esteemed panel of experts. Thank you to our video participants. Thank you to our video producer, Voyager Video, and Junior League member, Lindsay Barace. Thank you to the entire Junior League of Scranton membership and the forum committees. And especially thank you to our co-chairs, Molly Jones and Maggie Martinelli. A little housekeeping. The bar will remain open. The men's room is in the closet. The ladies' room is across the ladies' parlor and to the right, so go all the way through the end. I thank you all for being here, and please enjoy the evening.
If we look at the city of Scranton and Lackawanna County, you can look at all of the statistics and you can just get depressed.
Neighborhoods in Scranton qualify as a food desert when they're a certain distance from a grocery store. And in Scranton and the area, we have plenty of places like that.
20% of the student population nationally that is in poverty, but locally we're more at 82%. So that's pretty significant.
Without that adequate nutrition coming in, we're going to see a lot of, delays in growth. We're also going to see some behavioral issues, some anxiety going on, and also academic issues.
It's really important for people to focus in this area about food because food is essential for us living a good life.
It's not just something that's impacting one small organization, it's impacting the community at large. And the whole it takes a village mentality is really what it's going to take to make the systemic changes.
If we look at the poverty rate in Scranton of 23.3% compared to 13% across the rest of the state, how can we help to close that meal gap, to really bring the food to where it is needed? But also, how do we inform people that may have the resources to go get healthy food, but aren't making the right choices?
Several years ago, we started doing the research to figure out where we fit. We have always been an organization dedicated to meeting the needs of the community, and we were doing that in lots of different ways. But we really thought it was time to narrow our focus to figure out a way to make a bigger impact in one area rather than small impacts in lots of different areas.
We brought experts in different areas, for instance, domestic violence, child abuse, and hunger and nutrition. We listened to those experts and we did decide as a league that the areas of hunger and nutrition were the most needed in the Scranton area at this time.
Being an organization dedicated to not only developing leaders but also empowering women within the community, we find that this is an area that we can definitely make connections in and continue to help.
Food insecurity really has an extreme impact on students. If your basic needs aren't being met, then it's really hard for you to be able to focus on the other areas of life that require development.
Throughout the year, we hold several different Done in a Day events, and one of my favorites is the Kids in the Kitchen event. The purpose of that event is to just empower youth in our community to make healthy lifestyle choices. A Kids in the Kitchen event usually takes place at some sort of community space and typically includes a story time preceded by a creative and really fun, healthy food-based activity.
Most individuals who are food insecure are purchasing calorically dense foods or energy dense foods. Pretty much foods that are high in calories that offer no nutrition whatsoever.
If you don't have a high income, then it's sometimes very difficult to eat healthily. because the kind of food that has the most nutrition in it is generally also the most expensive. And it takes a certain amount of knowledge to cook with healthy foods.
Another event we do is the Crockpot Cookery. That is a community project really focusing on teaching children how to make healthy food choices, and we follow that up with instructions to parents or caregivers on quick, inexpensive foods to prepare using a crock pot.
So that event was so successful that this year's provisional class is doing a spin-off of it, and it continued to be its own independent project. This year so far we have partnered with the St. Joseph Center to teach those women how to safely use a crock pot, give them ideas about fruits and vegetables that are in season, and ways to incorporate the healthier foods into meals that can last them several days.
We've also done a food drive to benefit the St. Francis Assisi Kitchen, and we have also cooked meals for families at the Ronald McDonald House. New this year is our Healthy at Home project, which was actually started by our provisional class. The Healthy at Home project is a community project which is going to focus on teaching families the benefits of prepping meals in advance that are nutritious, and will make sure a family has a nutritious meal plan for an entire week. Another way we support our impact area of nutrition and hunger is through our discretionary fund. The Junior League of Scranton recently invited area nonprofits to apply for our annual discretionary fund, which is available through the Community Research Committee. This year's discretionary grant is going to be awarded to a nonprofit organization that will use the grant money for a program or project focused on childhood nutrition and hunger.
All of our meetings revolve around the topic of hunger and nutrition and ways that the Junior League can partner with people in our community to lessen this issue. Some of the newest ideas we were looking at as recently as last night at a board meeting included community gardens within schools as a way to not only teach youth about how to plant and garden and maintain, giving them some life skills, but also partnering with people who already care about the children and want to see them do well and learn and have access to healthy things.
So the relationship with the Junior League started in just a casual conversation about what was going on in the community. And so I spent a lot of time out in the coffee shops and getting to talk to people and learn what is going on in those pockets of the community, and learned about the efforts of the Junior League around the topic of hunger and nutrition. And lo and behold, Springboard's #1 priority is really figuring out the conversation around healthy food access. And so whenever the opportunity came to work with an organization like the Junior League, an organization that's really focused on how do we improve volunteerism, how do we engage and empower the individuals that live in our community, and how do we bring ourselves together to have a collective impact on a specific topic, it was a no-brainer to really figure out where those opportunities were going to be and how we could work together.
We're also looking to partner with Lackawanna County Office of Youth and Family Services, reaching out to their older youth who are going to be transitioning into life and may not have the natural supports that many of us are lucky enough to have, to teach them how to cook and use crock pots as well.
When your basic needs are being met, when you have, a stable home, when you have a reliable place to stay, when you have safety, when you have your nutritional needs being met, then you're able to work on the other facets of your life.
It's sad that this actually is going on in this day and age, but there are resources out there.
We will slowly but surely improve the health of our community over the next 3, 5, 10 years. But we're going to do that by having conversations about food, by having conversations about transportation and transportation access, by addressing the issue of opioids that is running rampant in our community, by really figuring out where all of those things start to come together and looking at health in the broadest possible definition.
It's been a really great journey. I know that when we started out, we really said, what are the areas of need in Scranton? And once we knew what we wanted to do, we could say what programs can we put in place where we have options for members for direct service and where we can be sort of catalysts in the community to bring a lot of different entities together. I think in Scranton, we do have a lot of great nonprofits and we don't want to duplicate efforts. And that's where the Junior League can really fit in, where we have an opportunity to bring people together at the table and come up with, different strategies to make a change in our community.
like to introduce Brian Ebersole from Springboard Healthy Scranton to come up, and he's going to moderate our panel. Thank you again all for being here, and enjoy.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening. Okay, this is where you respond. So we're going to try one more time. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for coming out and being part of what we're hoping will be the first of many community conversations, an ongoing dialogue about how do we address food and hunger in our community. And so you heard and saw a video. Thank you so much for putting together the video that helps to set the stage, to lay some context, and really to show you why the Junior League is so excited and so engaged in this particular topic. And as I look around the room and see people that have been part of this conversation, whether through the Junior League meetings and my engagement there, or even going through and having conversations with individuals from our local food pantries or some of the social support organizations, the medical school, really those different pockets in the community that are all doing really cool things. But now it's an opportunity for us to really see how do we take this energy and this opportunity in front of us and take it to the next level. So what is that opportunity for all of us in the room, including our panelists who have joined us tonight? The opportunity to really bring us all together, focus our attention and energy, and really make an impact so that we can continue to demonstrate the ability and the work that can be done by all of us coming together. So in the way of background, like she said, my name's Brian Ebersole. I'm just excited to be part of this community conversation. So how do we bring together the individuals? And whenever I was brought into this role about 6 months ago, the question was given to me of kind of what's that topic that you can really get people excited about? Well, as you think about the topics and how we come up with the ideas around Springboard, really it's hard to be opposed to food. How many of you ate today? Right. I mean, and we kind of chuckle, it's like, but not everybody in our community has that same opportunity. But if we bring together the conversation and we start to bring people together and think about what's going to be that place where people can come in and let their guard down, where they can let their own little piece of the world down just a little bit to begin to think about how do we make healthy food access the conversation that we're going to have. And so tonight we're going to start that dialogue. We're going to set the context a little bit deeper, share some of the data. We're going to hear about some programs that are happening right here in our community, but also around the country. And then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into really that opportunity for collective impact. What are some of those spaces where we can start to think about opportunities for each one of us in this room to engage, to volunteer, to be part of, to really help to create some of those other ideas? And then as we go through this journey over the next year, really beginning to bring those ideas from other communities. And what I like to say, we're going to Scrantonize them. We're going to make them ours, and we're going to do them better than anybody else could have done them. So tonight, I thought we'd bring together the best of the best. And so we brought together a panel, and we want them to just help us set the conversation. We know that there's lots of you in the room that are just as expert in your areas as this group is. But we thought this helped to bring the conversation forward. So what I'm going to ask is for each one of them to go through and introduce themselves. And then I phrase the question just as blunt as I can. Why are you here? So why do you care about this topic? But more importantly, what do you bring to the conversation? And so how do you help us to inform the dialogue a little bit? So we want to know who you are, the organization and the entity that you represent, but really take us through that next step of why you're here and why you're part of this conversation.
Right.
Terry, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm tonight's designated DDP. That would be the dismal data person that was talked about at the beginning of the film. I represent an organization with an unusually long name. It's the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development. We're a research group that focuses on applied social science research and economic consulting. We're affiliated with 12 higher education institutions and the business community in the two-county area. I'm here tonight because of an experience that I had as a researcher that was transformational. In 2012, we were asked to conduct a community health needs assessment for northeastern Pennsylvania, Lackawanna, and Luzerne County. And what that meant is that we needed to go out in the community and gather data. Data is not readily available at a very granular level. You could get some statistics, but you really don't understand the context of the data until you talk to the people. And so we had an opportunity to go out and interview a few dozen individuals from the community, conduct focus groups. And the focus for me was on the vulnerable populations of our community and what we learned. And we learned that too many of our neighbors have to make choices of whether they pay the rent or buy the food, whether they buy their prescription meds or they buy food for their families. And that's very disconcerting in this day and age and in this country, that our neighbors have that issue. And what we also learned is many of the individuals we talked to are experiencing this because it's circumstances beyond their control. Not because they're lazy and they don't want to work or things like that, but it's circumstances of life that have involved them and they can't get out of them, and many work for a living. And so I will defer to the next person and talk a little bit more about that kind of data when it comes back around.
No problem. And this will be the only time that we'll go in order down the table, okay? So since I didn't warn you ahead of time, that we will just randomly go to people. So we'll actually go down the table, but just be anticipating that the next round will just be wherever it goes. Go ahead, Clancy.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Clancy Harrison. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a TEDx speaker, and I'm here representing the people that I work with every single day. Those are the people that we feed. I ran a food pantry. I do run a food pantry in Kingston where we serve 80 families a week. We have a bi-weekly produce stand that's free. But I'm on a mission to transform how we talk about hunger and poverty in the United States. And as a dietitian who was a food service director, I've always worked in some capacity with hunger. But before I started working at the food pantry, I had this internal revelation. I was asked to be the president, and I thought to myself, you know what? You have to promise yourself, Clancy, that you're not going to judge, because there's going to be people there that's going to take advantage of the pantry. They're going to be lazy, they're going to want free food, and you better not judge them because you're a rule follower. And that was an internal conversation that I had with myself. I didn't share that with anyone. I went to work there, and then I became a leader for the Community Voice Project, where I actually sat down and I interviewed people who experienced hunger, and I got to know their story. And we took them to Congress. We took the real face to Congress, not only the statistics, but their story. And now my mission is to share not only how wrong I was, but also it's a very common misconception that I had. It's not the way of the world. So I publicly speak now to healthcare professionals. I speak at universities, nonprofit organizations across the nation on how we can change the language and understand the real face of hunger. And I'm going to throw a statistic out right now that people really aren't talking about. If you look at the Feeding America meal map, 35% of the people who are food insecure in the United States, which food insecurity means you don't have access to food, or you're eating food but you're not eating high quality food. 35% live above the threshold for food assistance programs. They're the working poor, and we're not really including them. We automatically think that it is people who live in chronic poverty.
Absolutely. Missy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Missy McTiernan. I'm the Chief Academic Officer in the Scranton School District. And it's simple why I'm here. I represent who I feel are the most important people in the community, and that's our kids. And in the Scranton School District, we're 82% economically disadvantaged. We are approximately 9% English language learners. We are 17% special ed. There are over 70 languages spoken in our school. We have many issues, and one thing that I think we do a really good job is they are provided free breakfast and lunch during the confined day. It's when they leave us. We're not taken care of. As a community, we're not taking care of our kids. So I'm hoping to leave here with some great ideas of bringing back and how I can work with the community to make sure that we do take care of our kids. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Megan Loftus, and I represent Friends of the Poor, which is a nonprofit agency in Scranton sponsored by the Sisters of the IHM. Our mission is just to ease the burden of living in poverty and enhance the quality of life for all who live in low to moderate income communities. So I memorized that one. And I think I'm here on the panel to represent, what the local agencies on the ground are doing here in our community. A lot of state and national organizations on this panel, but we just, again, putting a human face to some of the statistics and some of the things that we hear about, and talking about what the needs are of children, what single mothers, families, elderly. We kind of see it all at Friends of the Poor. We serve 1,400 households a month between our 8 pantries. So just kind of here to talk about our experience and what the trends we've been seeing in the last few months for progress, and also where we still see the gaps.
All right. Hi there. My name is Bernadette Downey, and I'm thrilled to be here amongst you all because as a former member of the Junior League of Washington, it's nice to be around sisters, if you will. So very happy to be here for that reason, but also to share a little bit more about the No Kid Hungry campaign, which is the campaign that I work on for the organization Share Our Strength, which manages several campaigns. And the No Kid Hungry campaign really has a very clear understanding of our expectation, which is that we believe every child should have food every single day, and every single day they should have access to that nutrition. And so we do that by doing a ton of research, a lot of partnership, collaboration, the public and private sectors, and trying to increase access to the federal child nutrition programs, most especially, and really looking at programs that are vastly underutilized across the country. Those programs are the school breakfast program, which are offered in schools, the summer meals program, and the after-school meals programs as well. We think that, and this is probably one of the reasons why I love getting to work on hunger issues, and in my day-to-day, I'm actually managing our state advocacy initiatives across the country, including here in Pennsylvania, which I can touch on later. But I think the thing that's exciting about getting to advocate on behalf of hunger and getting to talk to you all about this issue is that it is solvable. There's a lot of really challenging poverty issues that we try to tackle every day, that billions of dollars are being spent on to try to get to the root cause of. The exciting thing about this work is that we have programs, we have food, we have will. So really, it's just a matter of connecting those dots, breaking down those barriers, and getting ourselves out of the way to connect kids to the nutrition that they need.
All right, and before our last panelist introduces herself, I just want to let you know, so in your program, it listed Gretchen Hunt as being part of our panel, and unfortunately, the bugs that are going around have hit her and her family pretty hard, and so she wasn't able to join us tonight. But what we've done is infused a couple of her points in with our other speakers, and then we had the opportunity, as we started to see the audience come together, to engage Katherine with us and have her tell a little bit about herself, and really that opportunity for her to share a little bit about a previous experience in working with the Junior League and the programming that she does, and how we can learn the lessons from that experience as we start to think about the opportunities here. So Katherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be the switch hitter for you. So when I'm talking about my perspective and Katherine, I'll use this side, and when I want to speak for Gretchen, I'll just flip it around.
That would be
for you,
perfect.
right? So I can do Weinberg too for you.
Perfect.
Because I've had the privilege of working with her, and I can't say enough great things about Weinberg Food Bank as well. So my name is Katherine Plateau. I'm the director of the Ruth Matthews-Berger Women with Children program at Misericordia University in Dallas, Pennsylvania. We are a really unique program. We're one of only 8 of our kind in the country, where we help single mothers who are living at or near the poverty level achieve their college educations. They accomplish their 4-year degrees, and they come and they live with us for up to 4 years with their children. So needless to say, we never have a dull moment in our program. So we have 3 homes on our lower campus. We have a capacity for 16 families that we support throughout the year, and all of them represent what we hope to be that 2-generational model of success, where we're breaking the lines of poverty 2 generations at a time. We see the success rates of our students, which are rather remarkable, and we can speak to this in a little bit too, but how education can be a pathway out of poverty. And at the core of that, paying attention to the needs of our families has included the food insecurity issue, which has been rather profound. we've been able to be educated by our women on what those needs are and then how we would address them. And we have collaborated very closely with Clancy Harrison, who's been just integral to that whole entire process. So on one side, I can speak to that. On the other side, I can also speak a bit to my experience as a community volunteer in the town of Glen Lyon, Pennsylvania, which is where I happen to be from. It also notably is the most impoverished town in the state of Pennsylvania per capita. And knowing that information and having that come out a few years ago, we as a community organization in Newport Township developed a food drop-off site in that town, and I can speak a little bit to the subsequent impact of that as well. So I'm really privileged to be here. This is a really remarkable panel, and I'm just the caboose on this train, so thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. We appreciate you stepping in and being part of the discussion. So I'm going to come back to you, Terry, and have you help us to set the context a little bit more in depth and talk a little bit about some of the data gathering that's happened beyond the CHNA process, but really to help us set the context for the issues.
Sure. First of all, I would like to preface my remarks in the fact that we do live in a wonderful region. The quality of life here and all of the amenities and the assets really lend itself to an exciting, vibrant, and changing community where people will continue to want to be. And the things I'm going to talk about with some of the challenges we have are really no different than a lot of other communities, most other communities across the country are experiencing. Our challenge is that it's been something that's sort of been in our culture now for 100 years. Essentially, we have always had a higher level of poverty in our region than most other areas because of our economic structure. We have been built on a blue-collar economy, and historically, the blue-collar jobs paid less than the white-collar or professional jobs. Now, that's changing, by the way, but historically, that's where we've been. The other element of that is wages here are less than wages elsewhere for the same job. So what that all means when you have people with less higher education attainment, and I will preface it by that doesn't just mean college, it means technical school, trade school, apprenticeships, certifications, and credentials. Lower wages, you have a higher poverty level. So in Lackawanna County alone, the poverty level is about 15%. It's dropped a little. It really went through the roof at the time of the recession. And while the rest of the country was coming out of the recession quite rapidly, we weren't. We were struggling. And so now we're still higher than pre-recession levels. 18.8, so nearly 19% of children in the county are living in poverty. That's a lot. Just with the adults alone, it's 33,000 individuals. That's a lot of people, our neighbors in this county, that are living in poverty. And you touched on something before when you talked about a living wage. About 33% of those people living in poverty are not eligible for any kind of assistance because they earn too much for the guidelines, but yet they don't earn enough for a living wage. So what does that mean, a living wage? A living wage means housing, childcare, food, education, transportation. It doesn't mean fancy cell phones and computers and concert tickets and all those kinds of things. And if you do the calculations for our area, you have to earn about $22 an hour if you are a single parent. If not, you are essentially not earning a living wage. And which means you then have to make choices on what it is you can buy, where, when, how, and choices on those basic things that I mentioned. So again, not superfluous things that people do. So that becomes a huge challenge. About 13% of the folks, a little bit higher than 13%, are food insecure in Lackawanna County. It's over 18% of children. And what does that mean? That means close to 10,000 children in Lackawanna County are food insecure. That is an absolutely huge number. it should be zero. We shouldn't have children hungry. And so we face some of these economic challenges by the very nature of our economy being primarily home to lower wage jobs, earning lower wages than similar counties and communities, not just in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but across the country with similar cost of living. And so that really is systemic, and it's helping to make the issue of poverty and folks in poverty more of a generational issue for our region. So what we need to do essentially is transform so that we solve the problem. And while programs like some of them we're talking about tonight and some of them that exist in the community help with the issue, but we really have to look at how do we address the root cause. And the problem isn't going to go away anytime in the near future. We are experiencing some in-migration, not immigration, but in-migration. It happens all the time. People move from New York to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania to New York, everywhere. And what we're seeing over the past decade is that there's two distinct demographic groups moving into our region. That lower to moderate income group and the middle to upper income group. They're both moving for the same reasons. Cost of living, cost of housing. It's more palatable to buy a house here, to pay rent here, than it is in the urban core. So that middle to upper middle income group is moving here. They're buying the homes in the suburb. They're pushing up the values of the homes in the suburb. Many of them are commuting back to Philadelphia, New York, and the Lehigh Valley to go to work because the wages are higher there. There's more job opportunities, more economic opportunities. That's a problem for a number of reasons: sales leakage, lack of community engagement, philanthropic issues, and so on and so forth. But that other group that's moving here for the low-cost housing and lower cost of living is that low to moderate fringe group. And they're going to continue to come. They're coming and they're representing all sorts of races and ethnicity, which is actually a very positive thing because that creates vibrancy and culture in a community, and I think that's what we all want to see. But with that brings the challenges. You couple that with the individuals here who have grown up in households where they have lived in poverty and maintain that cycle of poverty, and our problem escalates, which is why our numbers are higher than average in most cases.
So I think, as Terry pointed out, and one of the things that has been really fascinating as I've gone around and meeting with different groups in the community, as we look at that in-migration that's happening within the community, I went around and interviewed some of the immigrant populations. And as I sat down with them to really understand what is it that's drawing you to Scranton. So we heard about the housing and the affordability of housing. The other thing is, it's that we're a welcoming community. And so word has spread because many of us and many of our families that have been here for generations we still remember the immigration experience of coming to this community, to become part of and immersed in the community. And so they said it's a welcoming space. And so they're willing to share that sense of community that quickly comes around them because they say that we're all very welcoming to them. And so how do we start to transition that part of the conversation and use that very positive experience to help to guide us? And as we go to there, I want to turn to Bernadette, and I want to talk a little bit about, and for you to share some of your experiences in developing the concept of a movement, to really think about, as we bring the dialogue together, how you start to organize a little bit, and also to share what that looks like for a child or for a family that may be food insecure. So if you can help us to understand that, and then I'm going to give Megan a heads up that we're coming to her next, which is to really take us and show us that experience as we see it here in the community.
All right, that was a big one. I'm going to dive in though. So
I'll help guide you.
Okay. So I think, the Junior League is a great example of how you can get this process started by identifying the issue and identifying roles. I mean, my organization's called Share Our Strength because the fundamental belief is that everyone has a strength to share in addressing poverty in America. And I think, by surrounding this issue of hunger, it's really something, like you said, that folks can get behind. People understand the importance of food in their everyday life. They know they don't like it when they don't have food. And many people, more than you would imagine, when they interact with these issues, will come forward and share their own personal experiences with food insecurity. They just didn't know that that's what it was called when they were children. And so we've really been able to, at the No Kid Hungry campaign, been able to kind of seize this really, universal connection that people have to food, to feeding others and to contributing to the others in their communities around them. What's exciting is that hasn't meant, you've probably seen Guy Fieri talk about No Kid Hungry on the Food Network. That's one way, of course, that we can galvanize and get people excited about this issue and thinking about it. But what's more exciting to me is being able to capture youth. The very same people that we want to be able to reach these programs, they are Generation No Kid Hungry for our organization. They are providing authentic voices and stories through Instagram on a regular basis and sharing with their peers and starting from a young age why it's so important for them to be aware of what's happening in their own classrooms, what they can do. We have, a wonderful, amazing set of culinary talent. So chefs across the country are training right now to do a 1,000-mile, 3-day bike race in two parts of this country later this year. And they're doing that to raise funds, yes, but also because for them, food is personal. It's what they do every day, and they believe that every single person should have access to this food. So you can kind of see, whether it's our youth ambassadors who are at universities, where it's kids and moms and dads who are doing bake sales for No Kid Hungry. Hunger is just something that everyone can find a way to connect into that movement. They can find a place where they can contribute, and we really just value so much all of these different voices that bring that to the table.
And so one follow-up before I go to Megan. So how do you pull that experience from a young person? So how do you get them to come to that awareness and then a willingness to share?
It's really, it takes really intentional, dedicated work. We have actual staff. We have a couple team members whose entire job is to really connect with youth, to get on their level, to go where they are, to meet them, make them trust in the fact that we're sharing their story because it makes a difference. Like I said, food is so personal that it is extraordinarily hard to get people to open up and share their vulnerability and their inability to provide for their families or their inability to feed themselves. And I think you really have to work and provide that layer of trust. I'm sure the folks here will be able to share it takes a long time for your clients, for your partners. And I think maybe that's one of the things too. We don't necessarily always think of the children who speak up about their experiences as clients, as many in the nonprofit sector do. They're advocates within their community, and they're just sharing their stories so we all are better informed.
Absolutely. So Megan, I'm going to turn to you. So share with us a little bit about what that looks like here in Scranton.
What?
The food insecurity, the engagement, and then that building of trust that puts you back in the ability to give and provide food and help to meet that need.
Okay, so I would go back to what you said about Scranton being a welcoming space, and I think a lot of this is a credit to our sisters and the model that Friends of the Poor follows, and that we are a ministry of accompaniment, and we meet people where they are rather than telling them what they need or what they should be doing or how they should live. We try to meet our clients and really listen to them, let them talk about how they're feeling and where they are, and then try to see how do we best approach that. And our community is really good at not prejudging somebody based on what you think their needs are or what you think got them into the position they are, and rallying around each other to get that person, to lift them up. So we have so many agencies in Scranton that provide similar services, that we share services, that we work together between Friends of the Poor and Catholic Social Services and United Neighborhood Centers and Breadbasket, And we all have something valuable to provide, and we all have shared clients, and we work together to break that cycle of poverty and get somebody out. Because once you're stuck in the cycle, the smallest things can put you back in, like if you're out sick from work, or your brakes go, or your windshield gets dented or broken. So I think that really important and really key to like who we are as Scranton is listening to people and listening to their story. And I don't remember what the second question was.
Well, and I think, well, so we'll change the second question to be then, so as you start to think about in that kind of wrapping services around, if we stay focused on the food component, what are some of those opportunities that you see in front of us? So we have points out of the year where people come forth and are willing to give a lot. And then we probably have points where not so much. And so can you talk a little bit about maybe that ebb and flow where we hear or see the engagement, but when that next time might need to be?
Sure. So hunger doesn't take a vacation, we all know. And I've actually, when I took this position, was asked by a few different people, isn't Friends of the Poor that agency that just does a Thanksgiving meal? And I'm like, wait a second, this is year round. So we do have a lot of support around the holidays. You think it's cold, you think people are hungry, you see a lot of advertisements from multiple agencies, specifically through Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it continues a little bit into the spring months because spring is still really chilly here. But then when it gets to be summer, the weather is nice, kids are on break, and you don't think about the stresses of cold as much as maybe you did in the winter. But summer can actually be an even more difficult time for a lot of people living in poverty. There's no childcare in the form of school. Scranton School District is providing a great service in that they give free breakfast and lunch to their students. That continues not in the same sense and not to the same scale during the school year. So there are still children going hungry, parents having to find support or someone to watch their children so they can go to work, or having to stop work. So I think that the summer is a really difficult time for a lot of people living in poverty, and you may not naturally think of that. So at Friends of the Poor, we do have a couple different programs to get us through the summer. We do also do a summer lunch program like I know the school district does. And we kind of were tossing around, Sister Ann and I, the idea of why don't we come up with a food giveaway that's as large of a scale as Thanksgiving in the summer, because hunger still exists, and you don't need a holiday to need to sit around the table and enjoy the company of your parents and your siblings and that family bonding. So we all have cookouts with our family, picnics in the park, things like that that really bring together family bonding and stability, and also food. And some of our children in our community don't have that. So I think summer is, if you're thinking about volunteering, if you have a little bit more free time, summer's the best time to do that, because volunteerism kind of trickles off a little bit, and the need is just as great.
So, and I'm going to turn to Clancy now, because I think that as you've traveled around the country, you've seen things that are happening here, things that are happening elsewhere. As we begin to think about maybe summer projects or other opportunities, I want you to talk a little bit about the food justice concept. So how do we start to look at this in a different way?
Yeah, so just piggybacking off of summer feeding, I helped do something called Tasty Thursdays in the Wilkes-Barre. So 7 summer feeding sites through the Wilkes-Barre city, and they actually have people come from their high school students that work, and they pretty much babysit the children. There's enrichment, but there's physical activity. But every Thursday, I will go in with my students, and we do taste testing from a local produce from a local farm. The kids take home the produce, and they take home the recipe, and they get to taste something new. And for the longest time, I'm like, what, is this really making a difference? And then I'll go into the Scholars Program, and I have a kid come up and hug me saying, I remember that bruschetta that you made, and it was so good. Kids, we do pop-up food pantries, so produce stands, free produce stands, no questions asked. If you're a nonprofit, you can set that up through Gretchen, CEO, and we let people come and take produce, and we don't even ask. And it's interesting because people get mad. They're like, where did this come from? I can't take this. I am not taking this food. And it turned out that it was a person who was taking care of her family, and she was so embarrassed. So we said, go get 3 of your friends, we're gonna pack up the food, and we're gonna pack it with you, and we're all gonna take. So it's more like, we don't care if someone who, like myself, or our volunteers at the food pantry is taking food. as long as we're doing it as a community, it gives permission for other people to do it without having a sense of shame or being cast on. So we call that food dignity. And we try to create that culture at the Al Beach West Side Food Pantry, to the point that I've had students who are classically trained on the piano play the piano as our clients or our customers. We call them our customers. They walk in. We write nice messages on our butternut squash or rutabaga that says, "Thank you for visiting us. Come back again. You look great today. Have a nice day." It's like the littlest things make the biggest difference to our clients. And what we saw at the food pantry with these free produce stands is we have dialogue now between the volunteers and our customers. Their recipe sharing. Because what do you do with the rutabaga? Right? What is a rutabaga? And so they start talking about that. And then the whole dynamics and the energy kind of goes down, and it's something we should, just the smallest things that we can do make the biggest difference.
So when does a rutabaga come in season?
We can get it from now at CEO.
All right, I hope they have them at Southside Market on Saturday, because now I'm curious.
It was on the menu.
All right. At a bag spot? Oh, warning. If you parked illegally outside, in one of those spots with the bag over, which says no parking here, you may want to excuse yourself to the bar to quickly move your car before they tow it. They're moving the trucks in for the Chicago show, and so they will escort your vehicle to another location for you to pick up later. All right, so I'm going to turn so whoever needs to exit, just go ahead and somebody else go get a drink, just so they don't feel so uncomfortable. But Missy, I'm going to turn to you, because I think that that concept of dignity as it relates to it, and knowing that, I think you said it was like 86% of the kids live in a poverty setting or a disadvantaged background. Talk a little bit about the process or the decision to go to and offer the breakfast and lunch. And how that came about now to make it available to everybody, and kind of where you see that next opportunity.
Sure. So we qualify for what's called the CEP, which is the Community Eligibility Program. And basically it allows the nation's highest poverty schools and districts to serve breakfast and lunch free. This started, I believe, in 2014 and 15, and there was approximately 4 of our schools that were eligible, and I can proudly say today that 19 of our sites received that. So it's a wonderful thing that our kids, they come in. We're averaging approximately 5,600 meals served for breakfast each day. It's about 50% of our kids. And at lunch, we're averaging approximately 6,700 lunches served each day. So we also have something that we mentioned. You talked about pride, and people have mentioned it up here. Kids don't want to be different. They don't want to come and tell you that they don't have food. They think, the thing about Scranton is most of the other kids don't have it either.
Right.
But it's trying to get a child to say, I don't have something, or nobody's home when I go home to feed me, or, I can tell you stories upon stories when I was a principal of children actually going up and, taking hamburgers and sticking them in their pockets for a night, and sticking them in their other pocket. And when you say, what's wrong? Well, I needed one for dinner and I brought one for my little sister. These are the types of stories that are happening day after day, and it's here, and it's in Scranton, and it's a problem. So when it hurts, because when you say to the child, why didn't you just tell me? We'll do whatever we can for you. Well, I didn't know, I'm embarrassed, I don't want Johnny to think that I don't have any money, and so on and so forth. So when that hits you, or stories like that hit you, you really look and say, well, why are we really here? How is a child supposed to get through the day and they didn't eat all night? We're asking them to come in, eat breakfast, and then go right into math class. It's not realistic. If they don't get the proper nutrition and proper food, academics is not happening. So when I say that we need to take care of our kids, we have to take care of our kids. And it gets me very emotional. I'm passionate about it, and we have to do a better job.
Yeah, as a community, or as a state, we require that you get a vision screening
Yes,
and a hearing screening, but we don't require that you get food.
correct.
And so, like, how do we start to change that conversation or that context? So, Bernadette, I'm going to come back to you to talk a little bit about some of the advocacy options that may be happening here in Pennsylvania that we may be able to think about connecting back to this purpose.
Yeah. So, like I said, I love getting to work on state advocacy issues because I typically get to work with lawmakers and governors who know the challenges of their states and are willing to kind of sit down and talk across the aisle to make things happen. So it's been really fun for me over the last 2 years. I've gotten to do some advocacy work in Harrisburg, getting to know a lot of the state organizations here, working in the different regions and helping to address hunger and food insecurity in their communities. So in Pennsylvania, what we actually were able to accomplish, the governor has taken a pretty hard look at food insecurity and hunger in the state and kind of has this blueprint that you could find online if you're interested. And one of the real identified goals, which is something that we are really passionate about, is how do you improve the breakfast participation numbers? How do you make sure that when those kids who are eating lunch at school for free or a reduced price cost, they're low income enough to qualify for that, how do you make sure that those same kids are also eating a school breakfast? Because the reality is that it's not like they're getting enough income at breakfast time that they don't that they can provide for their needs necessarily during that period of the day. So in Pennsylvania, what we worked on, which is actually just getting finalized and rolled out this spring, is a new grant program that will target the highest need schools in the state with grants to help them implement what we call breakfast after the bell. And this is basically saying one of these big tools to help us reduce that stigma, that isolation of some of these programs. It basically makes the school breakfast, which is traditionally served in the cafeteria, it takes it after the bell, maybe brings it into the classroom or provides it in a what we call a grab-and-go setting, allows teenagers when they get off the bus to just grab a paper bag of a qualified meal, take it with them to homeroom or the hall, wherever they might be. So that was actually nearly $1 million that we got in the state budget last year. The grants are going to be distributed probably over the summer and start to be implementing those technical things. But we can go bigger. There's some states that have actually said all of these kids in these types of schools should be eating breakfast. And if breakfast after the bell is the trick that lets us do that, some states have said, let's require those high need schools, those schools where 70% or more of their children are low income and qualifying for free or reduced priced meals. Let's just make sure that they're getting this meal. Or, let's make sure that the data is available so as the nonprofit sector, we can actually analyze and understand which kids need food, which schools are meeting the mark, which ones are not. There's a lot of really cool things happening out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because just last week I went and visited one of the schools for the bag grab in the morning because I was fascinated to see, and literally it allowed for every individual, and it just became part of their morning routine to really help to reduce the stigma that is associated with it. So Katherine, I'm going to turn to you and you can pick whichever name tag you want to use. Yes. But as we think about the stigma associated with it and the program that you've developed at Misericordia, talk a little bit about what we should be keeping in mind as we think about addressing the stigma and helping to bring people to a willingness to accept the resources that are available. And then we'll start going back through the line to really think about how do we start to change the food supply system.
Sure. So I think there are a couple of things I could highlight to you, and some of them are very specific. And I guess my question to all of you, and you've been really attentive audience, thank you, but how many of you think you know at least one person who's food insecure? You just put your hand up. Okay. So congratulations, you're all just immediate stakeholders in this conversation. Because the truth of the matter is, if you start asking questions, you're going to get an answer. But you have to be on a more personal level, to some degree, to really get it. And so with our program, we really get to know our families and we have these conversations. And I think the one thing that you want to do and maybe consider is use yourself as the example to open up that dialogue. Because when you do, you start to get a lot more information that's very important to know and understand. For me, it was being at Misericordia when the first months I was there, and so charming, this is great, this is a wonderful place, and it really is. But I took some of the women in the program to an event where there was food provided. So everyone would go up and, do your thing, get your food, and sit down. And what was notable was they just were piling the food on their plates. Not at all aware of themselves or anybody else even noticing that, but they just did. It was an automatic thing to do. I didn't say a word. I just observed this. And afterward, I sort of pulled them aside and I said, were you really that hungry? What's going on? Because I noticed you took so much. And I said, we were close enough to have this conversation. It wasn't a shaming thing. It was just, I want to learn from you what's going on. And immediately the response was, well, I don't know when I'm going to eat again. And you're already here. You're with us. But you're thinking this way. The programming of that's automatic pilot. You have to start looking and paying attention and seeing what the behaviors are, especially if you're talking in the school context, because I think that's extremely important to see that. If you're an educator, you want to watch for these signs. That opened up every door in terms of what we were going to do with food access, and that's what brought Clancy to us, who's been vital to our program. And what we decided to do was we started to talk about what their needs were and educate ourselves on what that would mean. So what it meant to us is establishing food pantries in every home that didn't exist before. Start thinking about embedding these types of food access systems within your systems, whether it's an educational system, a healthcare system, you name it, consider it. A lot of religious organizations, I think a lot in our community have thought about that because they're probably the resources and the individuals that are servicing the most poor of our community first, but we can learn from them. And then how do you translate that out? Well, we translate that out by saying, okay, you're on a subsidy. You can be okay with that, and we'll talk about SNAP, and we'll talk about the importance of that. I always say the most shameful line in the United States of America is the grocery line. Because how many people feel comfortable opening up and sharing that EBT card in front of anybody else? Go there at 10 o'clock at night, you're going to see a different demographic shopping. This is the reality, and I think we do have to keep our ear to the ground and pay attention to what those needs are. So when you ask yourself, maybe from everybody's respective experience and then the systems that you work in, how you start to collaborate those efforts. I've seen and I've witnessed a dramatic improvement in not only the educational outcomes of our students, but also the children of those students. Clear cut, right across the board, behavioral improvement, school performance improvement, you name it. And it was because we provided those basic needs that included food. That fear was eliminated because there's always food there. We also eliminated the stigma because we opened up the conversation and we asked them to educate us. So I think when you do things like that and you couple it with a lot of what Clancy's been talking about, I think it's really effective. So just to kind of highlight that, I think that's important to, when you're down on the ground and you're really having these conversations, you bear witness to these things, you can start to mobilize efforts that are truly effective and are concentrated and then really have some terrific outcomes.
Oh, absolutely. So I still have 6 pages of questions left.
Yeah.
We have about 15 minutes. And so I think one of the really important parts of, bringing the community together and starting the dialogue, and hopefully this will lead us into our question and answer time period, is to begin to think about some of those innovative ideas that we can begin to Scrantonize. Okay, so what does that start to look like? And so maybe an experience or something that you saw someplace else, maybe something that you've seen at another school or another food pantry or another organization. And is there something that we can begin to start to think about to start to address some of the things that we've heard? So the data that is saying that we have the problem, we understand that. So now, is there something else that we can do? Maybe it is the food pantry in everybody's house. What does that look like to actually have a food supply that's readily available? So I'm going to let you guys decide who goes next, but really to begin thinking about those opportunities for the community to get engaged in a new opportunity or a new volunteer space, or something that we can start to think about bringing to Scranton or bringing to this conversation to impact the number. And while you're doing that, I would like you to think and bring to that the metric that you think we would be improving. Okay, so innovative idea and the metric that we would be improving for our community.
I can go first if you'd like.
Excellent.
So Gus mentioned in the video about healthy food deserts. And Southside is one of our biggest healthy food deserts in Scranton. And we've talked a little bit about at Springboard. There's also a Food Policy Council of Lackawanna County. And there's a lot of agencies coming together to talk about these food deserts and what do we do. And a couple of the other panelists have mentioned other barriers, like are mom and dad home at night to help make food? Do you have the proper cooking utensils? Do you have refrigeration? Do you have a stove? Do you have gas and electricity? And one of Gretchen, I'm just going to speak on behalf of her, her biggest motivators is that we have to provide.
She's here in spirit.
We have to provide prepared meals with some of these different vegetables and fruits that you wouldn't normally think of using, or maybe your family didn't grow up using. We have a lot of Irish and Italian in our community that focus a lot on tomatoes and potatoes and broccoli, and you don't think about rutabaga and eggplant and zucchini. So there's a really cool program, it's in Boston, that I learned about through Springboard called the Daily Table. And I envision it kind of like a Wegmans, but for everybody. So it's a grocery store similar to Aldi's that has affordable food. Maybe there's slightly less choice in brand, or food is just a couple weeks closer to the expiration, still good for weeks or months at a time. So that grocery store, 1, is affordable, 2, in Southside, where there's a healthy food desert, 3, provides jobs to people who live in Southside, and 4, provides meals, pre-made meals. So I go to Wegmans with my significant other, who is a military and police officer and is a large human. And he piles that to-go box high, and it's like $20 when we get to the register. That's not feasible for most people, most families. So these would be more like pre-packed meals that are made with fresh ingredients. The recipes are available that mom or dad can grab 3 or 4 of them and feed them to the family that night, or on a night that they know they're working late. The kids don't even know that they're eating rutabaga and that they like it. And then you can kind of repeat those recipes again and again at an affordable level. So that's something that I would love to see come to Scranton, because it's also a grocery store that could be utilized by the community at large. You don't have to be low income. And it's, I think, the measurable metric, that's kind of redundant, that we would try to meet there is not only nutritious meals and eliminating some of the healthy food deserts in our area, but also just to kind of see an uptake in parent engagement and providing meals for their kids to take to school or to take to practice, and also to see the community come together where it's not embarrassing to go there and to pull your EBT card out, or to talk about food stamps, or, I mean, I would most certainly shop there. So I think it's a place where you're not embarrassed to go. There's dignity because we're all in it together, and we're all kind of trying to accomplish the same thing, and everyone's just trying to feed their family at the end of the day. So that is my dream that I hope to realize in the next couple of years.
Excellent.
Yeah, I can go next. We have 2 programs within the school district that I would love to see take off even more. One of them is called the Homework Diner, and another one is our cultural nights. So the Homework Diner is basically set up so that we have a saying in the school district: if you feed them, they will come. So basically, the Homework
Here's
Diner.
an example.
Yes, yes, yeah. So the Homework Diner simply is a partnership with the University of Scranton, where the students at the U that are in the educational program would come and tutor our kids after school hours, and then the families would come with them. So you're not only working with the child, but you're also working with the parent on how to work with the child in certain areas. Because, you know, right now, you send home a packet in math, the parent doesn't necessarily know how to do. If you look at how math is done now anymore with the everyday math program, the parents are trying to figure out how to do the problem just along with the kid. So that's a real great program that I'd love to see expand. And the other program that really is great, and again, it's if you feed them, they will come, but this is an appreciation of our cultures because we have so many in our district, is the culture nights that some of our schools are having, where they bring in, we celebrate a culture that's within that school, and we have a lot of them, and then they also bring in their food from their country. So those are 2 programs that we do currently have. Not all schools are doing them, but that's something, again, that I would love to see expand.
I think that's a great idea. Terry?
I think the programs that we're talking about here are very integral to helping to resolve the problem. I don't think there's one answer, so I think attacking it from all these other different angles is a way to succeed. But I also think there needs to be collaboration, and we need to go beyond just the food and say, okay, what brought you here? What is the context of why you're here? And maybe that's engaging social workers involved to talk to people to find out what is the issue. Okay, you can't get a good job because you don't have a high school diploma, so let's work on GED. Or perhaps you can engage in this program at Johnson College and those kinds of things. So I think we need to look at, okay, let's solve the problem for today, let's keep everybody fed, but then let's change how we do things in the future so we're addressing problems at the root cause. And that could be done at the child level too. We've been involved with a program now for about 6 years that came out of Carbon County called the SHINE program. It's an after-school program, schools and home and education is what it's about. And it's a tiered program that the first thing they do is take kids from pre-K to 8th grade, bring them in this after-school setting, feed them. Then they get homework help. And then they're engaged in some group activities that are STEM related and some individual activities based on where they place in reading and math assessments so that they could work individually as opposed to in the group, but with teacher oversight. And the teachers are teachers in the various school districts. The program there has been in existence for 14 years. It's evidence-based at this point because of the number of students that have passed through it. There's also a parent engagement program that's been very successful. 2 years ago, we took that model and with some modifications replicated in Luzerne County. And with 2 years worth of data, we're finding out it's working. So 1 more year, we can really do a strong evaluation on it. And if it works, it can be replicated elsewhere. And that's significant because you're feeding children, but you're also taking those that need that academic enrichment, and you're helping bring them to the next level, which is going to benefit them in the future and help them get out of that generational cycle of poverty.
Can I say something? I'm wondering, I'm sorry if I'm a little out of it, but you're giving them the fish, but you're not teaching them how to fish. And I bet you in the public schools that home ec, which we used to call when I was a kid, is not required both of men and both the boys and the girls. Is that required for at some point in the junior and senior high school where the kids learn how to cook? They learn how to use the good vegetables rather than buying something off the shelves in a store. I lived in India for 10 years. And I saw poverty you can't believe. We came to the United States at the end of that. Talk about a culture shock. It was phenomenal. We couldn't believe what was happening in these supermarkets with rows and rows of junk food, piles of candy. And what are we supposed to do?
So
it's an education process, not a feeding process. I mean, I'm not saying that we can't do that. But the point is, what are we doing to educate the kids and the parents in cooking good food?
And I think you've helped us, that's I hope what this conversation is about, is really to start to get to some of those underlying issues and how do we make this part of the normal dialogue. I don't know, Missy, if you want to comment on some of the training opportunities that are available or those educational opportunities for the students, and then maybe Clancy as well.
Sure. With regard to nutrition, we have health classes, but we have family and consumer science classes in the middle school, and there is home ec in the high schools. It's an elective, so a student would choose to take that class.
And Clancy, do you want to talk a little bit about?
I would suggest you make it a requirement.
Health is a requirement in the high school. You need to get a credit, but
to learn how to cook, to learn how to cut.
And even to begin to think about, are there other opportunities of where that education can take place?
Yeah,
So
we
Clancy.
have that education through Penn State Cooperative Extension and other agencies. We call it Nutrition Links. We have SNAP education, so anyone who's on SNAP has the opportunity to have education. We actually have dietitians go in and teach people how to cook. I do cooking classes at our food pantry with low-income mothers. I have done cooking at the Women's with Children's program. So it does exist. I think we just haven't really touched on it here. We do.
It's where I think
Totally agree.
It's a great idea that we can add to the mix. I want to open it up for the last couple, if you have the innovative idea you'd like to throw on the table.
So I've been talking about this a lot. Obviously, it's about these programs that are underutilized, and I think for each individual here, what you can actually do about that is to learn more about what's actually happening in the schools, in your community, if you're sending your children to school, encouraging your children to participate in these programs alongside their peers is really critical. But here's the silver lining too on that, is when we're getting kids to participate, especially we're unlocking the potential of a program like the Community Eligibility Program, that CEP program. You will start to see more dollars flowing into your schools because these are federal programs that are reimbursable. So there's a community benefit here. So I would say metrics that we want to look at is, every kid who is available and eligible to receive these meals at school, they should be doing so. It's going to be improving your community finances. It's also going to be improving the home finances because those are meals that those parents don't have to necessarily have to stretch their budgets even thinner to provide. And I'll just add in terms of the food, so we call it food skills education because we have another campaign called Cooking Matters, and it's another great volunteer opportunity that I would encourage the Junior League of Scranton to look into. It really does teach these fundamental elements of how to identify food, how to actually cook and prepare food, and also how to shop for food because we've lost that critical skill of going into a grocery store and actually finding that you can buy fresh food. You just need to know how to purchase it and use your SNAP dollars, use your precious resources in a way that's more effective.
Absolutely. Clancy, do you want to add anything else as we think about the ideas before we open it up for questions?
Oh, well, I have my wish as a healthcare professional is that doctors, nurses, dietitians, PAs, they get on board. Even if you're a speech pathologist, if someone's diagnosed with diabetes and then that disease just set them over into the edge of poverty or they're making decisions about food, we suddenly rush in as dietitians saying, hey, I have an idea, why don't you eat more produce and all these great healthy things, but they never ask the person if they have access to food. And I think that a healthcare professional can be a very trusted resource for a patient, and it's about time that they start writing prescriptions for breakfast after the bell, summer feeding. They can go to, believe it or not, WIC already has this great referral system, so all we have to do is call up our dietitian at WIC and say, can I have that referral system? And then we start utilizing that in other programs and not create new things, but let's just start bringing them together. And I think doctors could play a vital role in that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more that food has to become the medicine that we begin to utilize for every topic. All right, so now we give you a chance. So thank you so much for engaging in the past hour conversation as we start to pull some of the conversation together. So we want to open it up to you guys to ask questions. We ask that you keep your question short and specific. If you want to target it to an individual, that'd be great. I will do my best to get them to not answer in 5 minutes, but more to a 30-second answer. And then we will be able to move to the next room to continue the conversation. This is just the starting point. So who would like to ask that next question? Go ahead.
Early on is great, and they have the influence of others, they may try things, but what are we doing to start early?
Honestly, not enough. We're not. I'm not going to lie to you. We're not doing enough, and that is, I think, as a school district, you say this is the problem that I think you hear testing, get the kids testing. At what point in time do we focus on that and not on? So we need help in that, and who is going to take the responsibility? Is that going to happen in the classroom? Is that going to happen with the social workers? Is that going to happen with the guidance counselors, which we don't have we have 2 elementary guidance counselors for 11 buildings. So I think the problem is, we know the problem. Now, who's going to address that problem, and when is it going to take place? To be truthful, that's a problem right now.
Clancy, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm an ex-food service director with the school systems, and I can tell you that Pennsylvania does have grants out for providing very unique fruits and vegetables, and as food service directors, we used to cut them up and put really unique things on the menu. So reach out to your food service director, get involved with them, because they could be really cool people to work with.
And I think the early childhood, is there a way for us to begin to engage the daycares? So a daycare entry point at, babies start to go there at 4 or 6 weeks. And can we begin that conversation with them to be one of those providers?
Brian, if I can real quick on that
Sure.
point. So that Cooking Matters program, like I talked about, we have curriculum specifically actually for daycare centers and providers of how to prepare and serve food for the 0 to 5 population. And it's actually, the Cooking Matters program is really starting to look especially at the 0 to 5 population. How do you get kids who are not participating in the WIC program in the rates that they should be? They do very often in the first year, and then it kind of drops off. So how can the food skills information and knowledge start to translate into the 0 to 5 population, so that way they're ready when they get to kindergarten and elementary?
That was a great way to start the questions. Who's got the next one?
I've got my friend question.
Okay.
I haven't heard the word waste yet. I can't remember hearing it said. But there are laws evidently that say that when a vegetable reaches a best buy date, it is thrown away. And yet there are, I was just wondering what is being done to take that food and prepare it or whatever, or use it in some way that, because it's going to be thrown away.
Yeah, so I run a food pantry, and I've actually used my own car through CEO, and I've gone to Weiss and Price Chopper, and I've picked up food that they would have thrown away, and we've brought it to the food pantry. Obviously, there is another piece to that, and that's the dignity piece. If I'm picking up something that's going to rot and I wouldn't eat it, I'm not going to serve it, so I'd rather take it to Hillside and feed it to the animals. We'll pill the cabbage leaves until we have a very nice bright cabbage. But there's a lot of red tape within the food service and liability that grocery stores are working through currently right now. And Price Chopper just piloted that, and now they're doing it in all their grocery stores. So we're starting to see slow progress there, but it is happening.
I would also say Friends of the Poor has 8 pantries, and we are coordinated through the food bank to pick up at several different grocery stores. The best buy date is not the expiration date, and the food bank does produce guidelines on how far past the best buy date you can serve food based on what category it falls under. And between our 8 pantries, there is never an ounce of food wasted. So if we have vegetables that we pick up from the food bank once to twice a week, they're always gone. We have refrigeration and freezers that we can store things a little bit longer. But we also have been reached out to by a few different grocery stores who wanted to donate dented things, ripped boxes that they can't necessarily sell. And we'll take all of that and try to clean up the package as well as we can without tampering with it at all. But there is a lot of red tape surrounding restaurant waste, which is people are definitely interested in what do restaurants and donut shops and places throw away at the end of the day. So we work with Panera, we work with Sheetz, but there are certain national corporations that just don't toe that line because they are afraid of the liability issue. So we're doing our best through advocacy to talk to them and say, we will pick up your food, we'll take it, we have people who will eat it. But it's kind of up to the individual corporation as well.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
Is the food bank, is that like a distributor for all the food organizations? Like instead of doing this one or that one, you just distribute to all of them?
So I'll put my Gretchen hat on.
Yep.
And the food bank is in Luzerne County, but it does service Luzerne and Lackawanna. And you have to become you don't have to be a member agency, I don't believe, but you become a member agency, and your agency, whether it's Friends of the Poor with 8 pantries, or whether it's 1 pantry in the basement of a parish, can go pick up food at their discretion. You just have to fill out the correct order forms. Individuals do not go to the food bank. If they do call the food bank or go there, they will direct them to the closest pantry to them geographically. But the food bank is basically the distributor for our region, where they collect larger donations from farmers and from businesses and from corporations, and then they distribute to us.
You do need to be a nonprofit to be a member agency, though.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, sir, thank you. I don't know your name, but I was a home ec teacher. I appreciate that you're valuing it. We may not be able to do it the same way, but you've inspired me to think I'm proud.
Thank you.
I'm kind of directing my question to Terry, but of course anyone can answer. In this room, I have to admit, I know many, if not most, of the people. And while I would not say you're preaching to the converted, because we all need to learn, I'm a little bit concerned that perhaps our public officials and business people don't really know how that is.
They don't.
They don't. I would agree. An education process, an information process, an understanding process. As I said earlier, you know, the statistics are dismal, but when you present the statistics, people then tend to jump to conclusions about the problems, or an individual is lazy and doesn't want to work, and that's what the issue is. And there really is so much more to all of these stories than that. But it's an ongoing education problem. And it happens with the good things as well as the bad things in our community, and I think that it's all incumbent upon all of us to make sure we continue to spread the word.
And just since this is my daily life, I think, and you'd be fascinated when you say who's against hunger or who's against, feeding people. I've met a few. Mm-hmm. And
thankfully they don't live in Scranton.
I've met everyone in Scranton yet, but it is like, you have to really try to understand where people are coming from, of course. And what I will also say to that point about the education, yes, you have to understand, and this is why it's so important to lend your voice and get involved in campaigns that are being operated and run through organizations in your state or across the country, because the opposite side, who are perpetuating myths and stereotypes and false illusions of what it is to receive, food from these programs, they're very organized, they're very intentional, and they are part of their own national movement on the other side. So, it is very important to be involved on an individual level and give back to your community, but you really need to pay attention to the policy that is being moved across right this week. There was a really negative bill voted on in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives on SNAP, and it requires all of you to be picking up the phone and letting your members know that it's unacceptable and we won't accept it. So you have to be organized and you have to take action.
Can I interject quickly?
Sure.
The next question. I think that a lot of the onus is on the nonprofits who provide the services to advocate for those that we serve. But we do get very deep into the trenches and focused on the needs of our clients and those who are the most underserved, and we don't always advocate or legislate. And legislation and advocacy are scary words to a nonprofit because there are legal parameters around how much you can do in keeping your status. So I think that what we rely on most is the community and the people who volunteer for us and who see what we do to keep spreading that word and to keep telling everybody else that they come in contact with what they've seen and what we do. And even just sitting here, we could probably each talk for 3 hours on all of the services our organizations provide.
And I haven't even started to talk yet.
Right. So, Friends of the Poor has a program called Food Shopping Friends, where we do teach people how to go to a grocery store and how to shop on a budget. And that was an issue that was mentioned a couple times, and I didn't even introduce that. So I think that we, as nonprofits, have to be better at advocating and marketing what we do, and then we rely on the community to kind of continue to spread that message, especially to our legislators.
Clancy?
Yeah, the best thing that everyone can do in here If you were someone who was on food stamps as a child, as an adult, or not even food stamps, maybe it was WIC, maybe it was the feeding program, the school lunch programs, and you're not on it anymore, tell that story. Go to your congressperson, man, woman, and say, you know what? Because of SNAP or because of breakfast, I was able to pass my spelling test. I went to second grade. I went to college, and I'm a productive citizen. You share that message, that's going to get some eyes, and that's going to get some ears.
Absolutely. So what I would like to do is hope, and I hope will happen, is the conversation will continue. So a couple things. I want to make sure that every one of you registered when you came through. So whether you pre-registered or you signed up whenever you came in, we want to make sure that we have a way to keep this conversation going and to engage each one of you on the ongoing conversations. We have the the Food Policy Council, which was mentioned. We have a food continuum conversations that are happening. We can make sure you get connected to the volunteer opportunities that they have mentioned and utilize the partnership and the relationship with the Junior League to get that information out to you if we have that. So we will make sure that there is a piece of paper out there for you to sign up. That way you can double check that you were definitely included in the distribution, and then the follow-up material and information that comes out of this conversation. So we heard tonight that it's solvable. Okay, so it's the forum to really talk about food and hunger and nutrition, and then begin to think about how we start to move our community forward in a different conversation, knowing that it is solvable. And it's solvable by each one of us coming to this conversation, being part of the dialogue. Showing up in this conversation is one step, but continuing this conversation, sharing the experience of tonight and something that you learned with someone tomorrow, so that whenever we get to next week, people are talking about why they weren't here to be part of the conversation. So that when we have the next dialogue about this topic, we bring more people to it. Not just those who are excited and passionate about the topic, but we start to bring the rest of our community along. I think that there's an opportunity for us to really focus our attention on where is that opportunity for collective impact. Each one of us is going to be able to do really great things, but now what we can do, and what I've learned through my short experience with the Junior League, even though they won't give me a membership card, really excited about their ability to organize and be focused on a particular topic. And for them to have the foresight to bring this to a public conversation where that conversation has been tried in lots of different ways, but now we can look at it across that whole continuum, and not just to the underserved, but really how do we inform the conversation in all pockets of our community and for everybody that's impacted by food and hunger. There's volunteer opportunities that I know are going to come up, so keep your eyes on those. Look for opportunities in the newspaper, so as stories come out about food, be willing to write the editorial, be willing to be engaged. Come and ask any one of these guys, any one of the people that are here in the room, and really start to think about how you come together and organize, because there's so much that we can do together. It's solvable, we can do it, and it's solvable in the near future. And so I'm going to turn things over to Maggie and the rest of the crew here for the rest of the wrap-up, but I really appreciate you coming, listening to the conversation, and as you think about it and process this, how do we go to the next level? And hopefully we'll have some of those conversations over drinks and healthy food out in the next area. So Maggie?
I'm going to invite Molly up as well. That's okay. My name is Maggie Nasser Martinelli, and I'm going to stand on my tippy toes because I'm very short. So I am the treasurer of the Junior League of Scranton. I'm also the co-chair of this event, along with Molly Jones. So we are so grateful to all of you for being here tonight. Brian kind of did a really better wrap-up than I ever could, but we do encourage you to reach out to not only the individuals that are here, but also to us here at the Junior League. The Junior League of Scranton is very focused on this issue, and we really want to have an impact. And the best way that we can do that is by supporting what's out there and helping to bridge any gaps that exist. And so our contact information is on the programs that you received tonight, and we also have a sign-up sheet out at the registration table. So we really encourage you to sign up if you want to be more involved, whether it's at the Junior League of Scranton or just in this conversation. So we want to thank all of our wonderful panelists tonight and our amazing moderator. Everyone was so wonderful tonight. we do encourage you. The food is still out there, the drink is still out there. You know, feel free to keep this conversation going, and we really look forward to seeing you again in the future.
As Maggie said, we would like to thank everyone who attended and everyone who showed interest, and also to our panelists and the individuals who participated in our film, who informed and educated us on this topic. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Junior League for stepping out of their box and actually hosting this. I hope it continues. It is well needed, and I have a deep, fond affection for the Junior League. I think you're very smart women, and you can do a lot for our community, and this is a huge step. And I encourage you to do more and continue this conversation. Thank you for your hosting.
Thanks, Sandy.